can follow and also watch the video later on. Or the videos that are on there now is from the prior session. No, I don't. Okay, so this week we're gonna work on internet artifacts, mostly looking at browser and internet activities through the browser. The session before last week, I think we talked about email and how to really look at email applications and email accounts, email headers. So today, when you are examining the Android, you are going to focus on what kind of activities and accounts that the user have to be able to access web app. So the number one platform that you often see for forensic investigation is going to be the browser. And right now, we mostly have some of the common browser, and that's what we're going to focus on. But in the future, if you have new browser that you have to work with, you should research the browser where everything is located, so that way it's a lot easier for you to use. Forensic toolkit like autopsy or bulk extractor to find your information. So your browser is basically an application where you can interface the World Wide Web. It's going to load the HTML file as a page to display the content in front of you. This is application layer for the communication and the networking part. So it's allowing you to visit different websites via the URL or the websites that exist on your World Wide Web. Some of the artifacts that we can find in the browser is going to be related to the case activity. It could potentially be cache file where your history information or your user history information that could tell you a little bit more about the activity that relates to the case, whether it is unethical or it is criminal related. Now, you would see that Chrome browser, Edge, and Firefox predominantly take the market. I think more Chrome and Edge than Firefox, but I know that users are also using Firefox. You also have Safari for the iOS and Apple user. So that typically run about 12 to close to 20% now. What you have is you have the majority of the browser that would relate to the common operating system that you see in the market. So in the first set of questions, it asks you, what type of files can a forensic investigator examine to identify unethical and critical internet activity to the user? You are going to find browser logs, which tells you when the application was used or accessed. History files that would be related to pages that the user visit via the browser application. So if I open Chrome and I would visit YouTube multiple times, it's going to keep the history of my visit to that particular website. My cache files, so temporary internet files, even in some cases, you see that people clean up their computer by deleting the temporary internet files or the page file. So what you see is you would see some cache. So that's temporary storage that you would have related to the browsing activity. Your cookies, cookies can contain credential and also content that needs to be saved, especially if you have like login activities to a certain page. So that cookie is used to quickly revert back to the content for a page that have been visited. Password that is browser oriented. Now, as you know, in the newer systems, the current modern system uses password blocker, and that's a different application that's integrated with the browser. So sometimes you would have to access the app information to be able to gather that the credential that you need. But let's say that if I am logging directly to the browser, like what I would with Zoom, as you saw here, right? I authenticated directly to the browser. So my credential would then be stored to the session of the browser. Yeah. Not usually, right? Some websites don't give you options. They're supposed to by regulation. They make it difficult for you now to navigate and decline their cookies because you have to go through. I had listened to an NPR session on a few data scientists, and they were talking about like how much lack of privacy when you're visiting these websites, right? They sell your data. So now I make it to the point, even when I'm in a hurry and I need to get some information, I still try to decline the cookies. When I go to the gas station, they always ask me if I want to put in my phone number for discount. I always decline because I don't believe in free products, especially in technology, because a lot of the times free means that you have to exchange your privacy for the free, right? But yeah, so I would encourage you to, decline the cookies as much as you can. Some websites you can't, right? In order to use their service, you have to allow the cookies, and that's what you must do. But there's a risk that we take for the things that we use. So good question. So password browser sessions. Also, you'll be able to see favorites on Edge or bookmarked on other browsers, right? So that's what we're going to see in the lab today. So the common browsers that you see, I don't use Opera. I know it comes with certain products. I think Opera is just not as popular, but Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and Edge. So you see Chrome, right? Especially if you're using a Chromebook or a Chrome related product or a Google related product. And then if you use Android devices, because it's developed by Google, so what you see is you are gonna have your browser. Then you have Safari with Apple, Firefox generally with Linux type of systems, but you can't install it onto other platforms. And then Microsoft Edge is for Microsoft OSs. So those are the 4 common browsers. That's what you see. Now, this is the path in Windows environment in your Windows PC. So if you install Chrome on your Windows PC for Windows 7 and 10 and up, you would see that listed under your user account and under app data. So each of the app that's installed locally, you're gonna see, I think we talked about this before, so it's gonna fall under the Google and your Chrome category. And you would go to the directory that you need. Okay, so where can I find this information? So if I need to find bookmarked for the browser on the system itself, right? This is on Windows PC. I would navigate into the app data, local profile, under the Google, then my Chrome app folder, and then it stores the user data, and under that it would be the default bookmark. So if someone has searched my bookmark list, they would have to dive really deep because I have many different folders for the many different categories for things, and I have lots of things bookmarked. It's a quick way for me to find things, especially when I'm doing research. So, you can find the path there. So you can look at this information on page 1 near the bottom. So when you read the data, the content is not very organized. You can actually extract this. This is in a text reader or a text editor app. But if you convert this into XML, it's actually a little bit cleaner. So you can extract the files and put it. So text reader is gonna give you just text-based information like this. The type that was visited, the website type, and then the time that was visited. Okay, so you have the timestamp. That's what you need. Okay, for the next question, it asks you what type of information is stored on the Chrome bookmark file. So the time that you added the actual website when it was last visited using the system. And then the name of the bookmark, because some people like myself would rename it. If I feel like their website name is too long, right? And then the actual URL. So this content is going to go inside the bookmarked folder, right? Inside the file. And then when you use a text editor like Notepad or Nano to read it, you'll be able to extract this information. Now, when you use your autopsy today, it's going to pull this for you. The application already has this mechanism. So it's going to pull that and it's going to put it into a folder so that way you can just go and look at it. So once you found the timestamp of your bookmark on Chrome, how can you actually read the date and the time? You saw in the screenshot earlier that I have. Oops. If you look at this, right, it's a large string of number. So how can I take this and make this into human time? Okay. It's you're going to need to decode it. And you can get a tool called D, as in the letter D, code to be able to convert your timestamp. Because the timestamp is in numerical value and you would need to convert it. Okay. So it talks about that here. See how when it says date added, so it's going to give you a large number. So you're going to get a bunch of numerical digits. And then when it was last modified, so meaning that I might have bookmarked my page and then I might have saved it under a different name or added it, edited it. So it was modified at this time. And then under that, you might have like a subfolder. I do that a lot. I have a folder for my bookmark, and then inside that I have subfolders. So any kind of subfolder that you would have, it's going to give you the hierarchical order like this. Okay. So to obtain decode, you can visit the digitaldetective.net website, and you can go there and see if you can download the tool. That's going to allow you to convert the time string that you have here into something that would be related to human time. So that will be the best way. Okay, so to answer number 5, we need to use a tool called decode. So for Chrome history file, what kind of information do you get from Chrome history? Downloads, right? If the user have a lot of files that they downloaded through the actual browser, it would show where the file was saved. Okay. And when it was downloaded, the location for the downloads, because for me, I downloaded and put it on my downloads folder, and then I moved the file. And then I delete the download version. So once I have a copy of the file somewhere else, I would delete or I would cut and copy it to another location, but it would show you the location of the file when it was downloaded from, right? And then the start and stop time of the download, when it began and when it ended, right? And then the size of the file that was downloaded. So the log of the log of your downloads from Chrome is going to be inside your Chrome folder. So that will be your browser history. Then any kind of keyword search. So you know that your browser remembers and share your data. You know that for sure because they, everything that you do, it listens. I don't know if I told you, I listened to this one segment one time on NPR, and they researched one of the Google researchers. His job was to look at what people type into, like he analyzed the data for the index search, right? My cousin, he's a developer for that kind of area, but he did it with BitTorrent. And before he got laid off, he worked for a company that take the index search from Google Chrome or Google and then be able to convert that into marketing stuff. That's what you see with the ads. But so the keyword search, the researcher has said that people type in the craziest thing into Google search. He said there were cases that people actually type in their emotions and their feeling, like people were communicating with it. Like he read a little blurb of this one actual log of a search that the user was drunk and had put in a paragraph of what he was feeling at the moment. And he said that became really common in today's age because the way people communicate when they're lonely and they don't know what to do, they started to talk to the search engine, which is really interesting. But anyway, so if you do that, right, your keyword search will be recorded on your system, right? A paragraph or a single word or the things that you search for. And it remembers, right? Even if you clear your cache, a lot of times your system would revert back to the information that it stores so that way it can quickly give you the search that you need. So your search term that you entered, and also if you do that on a URL, I do that a lot. I just don't use search engine to search directly. I would search directly onto the URL. So when you do that, it actually stores your keyword search as well. Okay. And then the history, so that means that whichever web page that's been visited by the user, and then the time that you visit that web page. So those are the things that you would find. It's scary how you would imagine that if your smartphone especially falls into the hand of people that knows how to examine your phone, they would know your entire life, right? Because everything that we have is on the smartphones. It's crazy what kind of stuff that you use on your phone. So like two things I cannot live without. I can live without my phone as far as text and phone call. Right? When people call me, I usually don't answer, and when people text me, I will answer like hours later. But some of the stuff that I use, like sometimes I have to communicate with chat messages on the phone. I can probably live, like there are times that I come to work without my smartphone. Not a good idea because in case something happens, right? But I can live without my smartphone, but I cannot live without my laptop, right? Like you would have to kill me. You would have to take me out cold before you take away my laptop because that's my life, right? It's work, and a lot of it, because like there would not be a day that I don't access my laptop. So I have multiple views, like one for here and others for my other work, but favorite one. The one that so here I take my ASOS here, and then I have a couple other that's parallel to that for work, for other work. But yeah, like everything revolves around that system and success. But anyway. So, all right. For next question, what type of information can you find when you look at a cookie? You would be able to look at their activities on the web, the session when they visited the site, especially secured session, right? I think in other security classes, I talk about cookie interrogation and how cookies can be extracted to be able to examine because it does store very private information, especially credential related. If they are doing online shopping, like on Amazon or other type. So now a lot of the websites have its individual apps to kind of control the browser capability to access your private data, right? So you're using their own separate app so they can control the data that you have on that app, which is, I think, a better way. But if they don't have security on their own app, then you're in trouble, like Temi, right? So, so some stuff it's probably not a good idea to share to the browser, but then some stuff you have to question about, like are these apps doing their best to control my data and securing my data inside the app? It's not using a typical browser, right? You have to install the app and be able to use it. It's still a web app. But anyway, your shopping cart information is there because you can close your tab and then a few days later you reopen that tab and go to that website. Guess what happened? Your cart still is there with all the items that you added, right? So that means that your cookie stores that information. Your transaction information, if you allow it to remember, because now it has to prompt you, right? If you want to be able to store that. Lots of people use their smartphone phone to pay for things and digital wallets. And so a lot of that come back to the app and the browser capability. So your transactional information, if you process that with the browser, the URL, your server IP addresses, your session services for authentication or not, right? All the security tokens that's being passed through, your data type, and your session stamp. So if someone is crafty, they can probably extract a lot of information about you and about what you use through cookies. So where can I find the cookies for Chrome? I would, again, this is Windows PC path. On the Windows PC, I would navigate to the Chrome directory under Google, under the local profile, under the user account, and then under the user data, under default, you would be able to find the cookies information. There are, you would have tools to be able to read the cookies, which is what we see next, but there are tools that we use also to be able to pull cookies. So what kind of tools can I use to look at cookies? Because when you look at the file and you try to open it on Windows PC, it's going to ask you for the app that you want to use to view it. We can use a text editor like Notepad or Nano or TextEdit. We can also use Nearsoft Chrome Cookies Viewer. This is a product that you need to, it's a third-party product, so you have to download and install in order to use it. Any question? If you're stuck on something, call me. I can pause. I ate something with a lot of MSG before I came, and so I'm just so thirsty. But you know, without that, food won't be good. In my culture, you have to have it. Okay. And the same thing with your cache information. So cache is different than cookies. That's your temporary storage for your internet, and it would revert your page content so that way you can load your page quickly when you visit. So Chrome Cache View, you can also visit Nearsoft to be able to download, and it has Chrome Cache View specifically for cache information. So you can't just use any tool to be able to read it. It has to be a tool that can read those specific files. So for 10, we're going to use Nearsoft product. Okay. So here's a screenshot of what decode would look like. Pretty simple application. So when you put in the string value, that the numerical value that you see from the actual time that URL was visited, right? It's going to decode that for you, and it's going to spit out your human time in UTC. So it will give you the date and the time in universal time. So there's some additional information about how the user looked at, or we can look at Mozilla, we can look at Gmail, and also Thunderbird. I think we talked about that in the prior week. And what is a cookie? and how it can be viewed. So in a forensic toolkit like X-Ways, it's going to show you like this. Okay. But when you use like a cookie viewer, it's going to look a little bit better, but still you're going to get some information. So it'll show you the server that was accessed, right? And some related information and also the timestamp. So when you're able to see like the number of cookies. Now, some security tools have this mechanism built in. So you can examine it also. And then your cache would look something like this. It would set up the HTML. So it will list the HTML file because that's what it does, right? HTML allows us to be able to see the display content for the web page. And then it gives you the time stamp. And then the service, which is typically HTTP 1.1 or sometime, if the version changed, and then if you have a download, it's going to show you have a download with that. And then also IP addresses like this. So if you select one entry, you can open it up and it would give you specific detail for that. Like Gmail, HTML, server time information, server name, cache information, also responses for your service, HTTP 1.1, and then the flag and the IP address. So each entry has specific detail, but the summary is going to look like this for all entries. Okay. All right. For 11, it says, why should a digital investigator recover users' web-based password? So, as you know, HTTPS gives us the capability to secure, and that means encryption. And in your session that is encrypted, your data can securely pass, right? Sometimes we would use TLS or SSL for that particular session to be established. When you authenticate to an HTTPS website, your information is encrypted. And that's the whole goal in using secure web. Now, if you want to obtain a web-based password, you are going to have to decrypt the data, gather the information from the user web activity. Probably if you ask forensic investigator, they would tell you that it's probably best to try to utilize security tool to get that password, meaning that a lot of the time try to crack that password, right? But sometimes you might be able to extract that information through security tools, and it will give you the password, maybe through network traffic, payload information, etc. There are different ways that you can get it, but it has to be in a decrypted format. Otherwise, you won't be able to see the proper actual password. So where can I locate password in Chrome then? You go to the default folder in Chrome under the user data. And once I get there, how do I look at each of the entry? Well, again, a third-party tool called Nearsoft Chrome Pass that allows you to read the password entry if you find that located in the directory. Any question? So I think a lot of the web convenience really tied to things like single sign-on, multi-factor authentications, and then saving that information and repeatedly use it. The benefit for the user is that it is definitely convenient not having to remember my password over and over again. But on the downside is that you're relying on the system to remember your password or credential, and likely if that someone has access to it, you would be able to not have your credential private anymore, right? But in forensic, we would find that information because now we have to go in and utilize that password to really figure out what had happened or what had went on for that particular user account on the web. And you can see from cyberbullying to fraudulent to criminal activity, all of these things are being used. And so you have to ultimately access the user account with the password information that you find. Okay. So password, you can find it on page 5. And then in the next section, it talks about Microsoft Edge, which formerly was Internet Explorer. So IE went out with the beginning of Windows 7. They kind of phased that out, and now it becomes completely Microsoft Edge to really eliminate some of the vulnerability in Internet Explorer that came with the prior version. But Internet Explorer been around since 1995, which was a long time ago, right? And they have upgraded many different versions in between. So when you are investigating Microsoft Edge, where can you find a bookmark file in the system? It would be under favorites. So Microsoft called that favorites instead of bookmark, right? And historically, your web information stays in the history file by default for 20 days. That's approximately 3 weeks, a little bit under a day less, right? So that means that if I don't change any configuration, the system would store my information for 3 weeks and then re-update, right, once that time window has passed. So the oldest one will get replaced, and if it's the same thing again, it will get updated again. And so you can find the cache file information under your web cache folder, under Windows, Microsoft, and under the local profile. And again, this is on the Windows PC. So what kind of cache information does it really store on a user? Import images, right? You can use forensic tool to carve out your file. And a lot of the time it will search by index. So it's going to be able to, so we can analyze the Edge cache file and then so we take an image of the cache file, put that into Autopsy or Bulk Extractor or ProDiscover, and then be able to analyze. So it's going to carve out the file. You can also search by index, through these forensic toolkit. Now, Windows 10, it's going to store 50 URLs for the max in the cache file. Okay. This can be changed, of course, if the modification or the settings has been modified. But however, by default, the 50 URLs is going to stay into the cache. Now, if you're searching for cookies, it's actually buried a little bit deeper than what you typically see. So it's under packages. And then you got to go into the Microsoft Edge and then go into another subdirectory for Microsoft Edge, and it's under cookies. This is for Windows 10. Now, Mozilla on Windows PC, this is a separate browser, so it's under your local profile, and Firefox is under Mozilla. So your profile's file is stored there. And Mozilla cookies are listed as your MZ cookies. So MZ Cookies Viewer is an app that we would use to read the cookies. So this is kind of like what we talked about, how we use Nearsoft to read Chrome cookies. You are going to get MZ Cookies Viewer to read MZ cookies. Every single browser uses different type of cookies format, how it stores it. So you would rely on a separate tool to be able to read it, okay? And that's kind of important to remember because, you know, if your notepad or your text editor cannot read it, then likely that you're gonna have to download the viewer, the application that you need to access it. Any question? We're almost done with the lecture. So here it talks about web cache, and it's a .dat file. When you open it up, it's going to give you the path and for each of the pieces of the content for the cache. You can also use Ripper, right, for the registry type of details, especially if the user uses the URL. And when it does, it's going to create a .dat file in Windows system, which is allowing us to actually see that in registry or for the registry. So this example for the Firefox for Mozilla, that's kind of interesting. So in this, the example that's shown here is that they found a path to the profile, right? This, you can see that's a bad guy. And then you can see a second user profile was bad guy needs love. And so under that, each of the profile, you would have specific cache information. So for Mozilla, you're gonna have to dig into each account profile. And then through the account profile, you'll be able to find more information about it. Okay? And then it gives you specific path and some information for that profile. Okay, so for today, you are gonna also look into social media. So why is it so difficult to find social media artifacts? One, social media contains a lot of information about the user, where they are in the physical space, what kind of information they currently have, right? The web activities that they're using. But the files are usually stored at the service provider server. So this is why you have some temporary information through the app itself on the mobile devices. But you don't have a lot of information unless you access their account with the credential, right? Without that, you have to ask the service provider permission to be able to pull their account information. So social media is slightly different than what you see, even though it is a web app environment. If they are using their specific app, everything from the app, it gets updated to the server. It synchronizes. And it doesn't necessarily have a lot of temporary storage on the local system. So you don't have a lot of the local information on your mobile devices. You do get the app and some account information, but you don't have a lot of information data about the user. So today, you see that Autopsy is fine with pulling from Twitter, right? Bulk Extractor is pretty good with social media. Twitter account, Instagram, some of the more common ones if you run the new version of it. The updates usually push for the actual relevant applications. So Bulk Extractor, Autopsy, those are the few that is freely available, that is pretty good for searching for Twitter profile. Okay, so where can you find service provider information for legal contact for authorization. You can go to search.org, right? And then here, mostly it's going to give you options to search for your internet service provider mostly. So in the case where I need to get access for, I don't know, Spectrum or Frontier, you'll be able to find that here. And then for forensic area, we would also navigate to this, okay? So search.org is going to give you some legal contact information about your service provider, especially the communication one. So how can you obtain artifacts on cloud server? And this is a very important area that we're facing now. A lot of companies house their data through a cloud provider like AWS or Azure. So the best way is to directly contact that company, possible that they are providing the web applications, and then also get court authorization to obtain the data. And sometimes you will have to go to the company that provide the service and then its service provider as well. So it's best to obtain court authorization and the organization permission to access the system to obtain the image. And this process is usually very lengthy, right? So you have to go through the legal system in order to do this. In Europe, it must be required that the user consented, even if they're in prison, right? So that means that the attorney has to step in and ask them to be able, bless you, to allow us, right, to be able to obtain the data. Now, if they are not around anymore, then it goes to the closest of kin. So that means that you have to rely on the attorney power in order to do that. So, if you approach them and they say no, likely that they would, right? Then you would have to go through the legal services for that.
And that's only in Europe?
Europe is required consent, whether they are guilty or not. Okay. So if they work for the company and got fired and you want to investigate if they were committed fraudulent, they have to allow you to do that. And usually people don't. So you have to go through the process of asking attorney or somebody to step in and do that. Sometimes law enforcement will be able to request that, right? But they have to provide consent. In the United States, once they are arrested, they lost their right? So there's different regional and regulation that will be applied. But also there's changes in how we look at regulations and what, so it also depends on like the political leadership and all that too for the US. So once you access their information, you have to notify them, right? Like your account was accessed so when you apply for the Department of Defense job, if they investigate you, that's what happens, right? They ask you you consent for them to access your account. But before you get to that stage, you know that they already investigate you, right? They look at whether you travel outside of the country to the country that you travel. Are those country risk country, right? Before they actually pursue any next step with you. And then throughout the background investigation, they also ask you for consent to access your social media. So the stuff that you might have deleted earlier on, they might see it or they might request for it as well. Things like protests and stuff like that is also, it comes forward in the investigation. So it's better to be honest with them at the beginning. Any question? Okay, so let me How are your scan going? It's still going. But if you have it populated, you can start clicking on it and look through. I know it's gonna respond a little slow, but. Do you have any questions regarding the lecture? So we have 2 more units after this, right? This is week 11. So next week is gonna be 12. And then the following week is gonna be 13. Next week, I'll talk about your project. I'll give you your USD that you need to begin your project. You should have about 4 weeks to work on it. Do not wait till the last few days to do it, because you might not get it done. And that's typically the case. When you're finished with the project, please return my USD so that way the next class can use it. I am using a smaller USD this time, so you are not gonna waste a lot of time scanning it. So similar to what we've done with the lab, you're gonna create an image from the USD. Do not open it up and look around, right? You are going to examine it like a forensic artifact, and then you're gonna find the details in the USD, and you're gonna create a report, and you're gonna submit that report. So depending on what's on your report, right, what you have found on the USD, that's gonna determine your grade for that course project. The USD doesn't have too much things to find, but it will have hidden things and things that is not visible in a typical open up the file. So you have to use the forensic toolkit to examine it. We are gonna have another lab that we are gonna talk about steganography, on how someone can hide things and how you can unhide things. Because I know we talk a lot about that in cybersecurity courses, and then one day I realized, oh, my students don't know how to use steganography. So we're gonna do that in the next couple of weeks. Okay.
One of the labs in the desktop courses actually had you like send something with like steganography, like it had to provide, I think, a message or a user account inside of a photo.
Oh, okay. So you embedded into the photo. Did it have you use a certain software? Okay. Yeah, we'll use a tool, and then we'll generate an image, and we can embed something in the image. Yeah, it's really easy to do. So typically you see a lot of embed is in PDF, because that's like the least suspected type of document that comes through. A lot of business use it. Are you talking about the virtual machine? Yeah, your virtual machine might not. It's you USB drive, but I don't know. Yeah. Good. This one is you save the. Good thing. I don't think. Okay, yeah. See if it will load now, and then I do before my other class, like I usually come here about 4:15. Yeah, because the other class they finish about 4 something. Okay, let me stop this video.